Sheffield, South Yorkshire, known for its distinguished steelmaking history. A working-class northern city that is unique for its access to the beautiful Peak District National Park and its own natively made condiment. There's something else, though, that this city should be celebrated for.
You didn't get anywhere like that, not even in London, where you'd got this subculture of football.
Sheffield is the crucible of football.
This growing game of football, played under electricity, must have been an incredible thing.
You should be walking into the middle of Sheffield knowing full well that you're in the home of football.
I'm in B&Q car park just off of Queen's Road on the outskirts of Sheffield city centre in the suburb of Highfield. Now, where I'm stood isn't just B&Q car park. It is also the site of the inaugural meeting of the world's first association football club. On October 24th, 1857, two members of Sheffield Cricket Club, Nathaniel Creswick and William Prest, formed Sheffield Football Club. Cricket was the most prominent sport at this time, but wasn't played all year round. Sportsmen at this time organised informal kickabouts as a way of keeping fit during the winter months. Those kickabouts went from one thing to the next, as the 1850s was the beginning of a footballing evolution.
Well, Sheffield had 1% of the population of the whole country by 1875, but it had nearly 50% of all the football clubs in the entire world. So just short of 200 football clubs were playing a common code, playing each other in the then town of Sheffield. And that was unique anywhere in the world. You didn't get anywhere like that, not even in London, where you'd got this subculture of football. Football actually as we know it today. Teams playing each other, playing a set of rules that we're familiar with today, playing a form of football that we now would recognise today.
Sheffield is the crucible of football. So it's where football was formed. Football clubs agreed rules, played each other, and the game could spread from that happening. But that organisation and structure really is, it's the birthplace of football. It's why we call it the home of football, because everything spread from there, and there are so many important developments that should be recognised, but it's that thriving football community. Without 100 clubs playing this game, how does it spread in the same way?
What set this club apart from the rest would prove to leave a lasting legacy.
When Sheffield FC formed, quite quickly, within a year, they started talking about what code they were going to play by. So by late 1858, they'd actually established a common code, which then developed, and other clubs from the Sheffield area actually adopted and played when they played their matches. That's right. So the Sheffield rules, which we still play by today, because they were amalgamated in 1877 with the FA rules. So if you look at those rules, we still play by them today. They came from Sheffield FC originally.
The members of Sheffield FC were innovators as well as rule makers. It is because of the Sheffield rules that efforts like these cannon back into play and don't count as goals.
Well, I mean, initially in the rules, and again, it's similar to that Aussie rules, you had two posts, and it was developing. People had different things. The goal was getting it between the posts, as simple as that. And so it was that over time, and then, suddenly, okay, let's restrict the height, so you at least have to get it through a goal, a set thing, and that became a thing, and then you would put tape across to do that, and then the solid crossbar clearly makes more sense when you're putting solid posts up.
And those same Sheffield rules are even responsible for the player standing beneath that crossbar.
Well, again, it's the key really is the offside rule, because there was no offside, so you get the positions coming out of, you don't all have to be behind the ball in the way that you see of rugby, so people can stay up. But then if you've got a player who can stay up front, you have to put somebody back with him, and you will tend to have somebody staying back with him and positions, and then, of course, from that, the furthest back one starts to be referred to as the goalkeeper, and eventually it makes sense for them to stay back, and it becomes a position.
The majority of football clubs emerged from cricket clubs, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that cricket had an influence on the game of football tactically.
When you look at how cricket's played, you've got a captain and you've got positional play. You've got a captain who says, right, I want you to move over there, moving the field around. And you found that first in Sheffield football. So Sheffield football, if you look at the match reports, had captains. The first accounts of positional play in the game came from Sheffield match reports, where you find the players spread around the field. So because of that, you also get the first accounts of combination play or passing in Sheffield football, where you had balls over the top, you had long balls, you had balls to the side, you had crosses, you had corners. Corners come from Sheffield. So if you look at a modern game of football now, and you went back to Sheffield and looked at how they played, obviously the pitches would have been different, the ball would have been different, but you would have been looking at the embryonic form of what we now have today in terms of modern football.
The game is built on cup competitions. The FA Cup might be the oldest cup competition in the world, but it wasn't the first. There's an interesting story about how a disaster on this very street led to the first cup competition anywhere in the world.
It was nothing to do with football. It was actually a theatre in West Bar in Sheffield which burnt down, and they were putting on a performance of the Great Fire of London, and they didn't put the fires out one evening, and the theatre burnt down. So the owner of the theatre, Thomas Uden, looked at all the football clubs in Sheffield and thought, I'm going to make some money out of this. I'm going to arrange a tournament and I'm going to use the money to build my new theatre. So that's exactly what he did, and he organised the Uden Cup, which in early 1867, the final took place at Bramall Lane in front of 3,000 people, and it was proof that you could make money out of competitive football, and it was the birth of competitive football. So the World Cup, the FA Cup, the UEFA League, all competitive football came from the Uden Cup.
This is beautiful downtown Bramall Lane, one of the most famous historical sporting stadiums in the world. But make the noise for Chris Wallace.
Bramall Lane was the idea of a man called Michael Ellison, and Ellison was the estate agent or manager for the Duke of Norfolk, who back then was easily the richest landowner in Sheffield, probably the biggest landowner in Sheffield. And he sort of had an idea that he wanted an area of land to be free from smoke. Very, very famous quote. The living conditions in Sheffield at the time were appalling. So we came here in 1854 following a meeting that took place at the Adelphi Hotel, where it was agreed by the Duke to lease a 10.5 acres area of land to what would become the Ground Committee for 100 years at £70 a year rent. A yearly rental which I believe was never paid by the committee ever once. It was always paid by Ellison.
In its 170-year history, Bramall Lane has played host to some of the most seismic moments in football, none less so than the first ever cup final. But perhaps the most fascinating match of all is that this ground played host to the first ever floodlit football match.
Imagine that. Sheffield, 1878, you know, you can't even think of Sheffield as anything but black and white at that point. You know, it's hard to imagine colour, and it's just impossible. Yet somebody came up with this idea of putting 2 wooden towers, no idea what the height of them was, but behind each goal, and then powering the light of 9,000 candles. Oh, what the hell's 9,000 candles look like? But powered by diesel generators, one each side, and giving the working class, or whatever class, as Sheffielder, Victorian Sheffielder, the chance to go and watch a game between the Reds and the Blues under floodlights. Imagine that. Most houses in Sheffield they wouldn't have gas, let alone electricity. So for your penny or whatever he charged, to come and see football, this growing game of football, played under electricity, must have been an incredible thing.
Despite all this history, vast swathes of people, regionally and nationally, are not familiar with Sheffield's footballing legacy.
I get why the Football Museum is in Manchester. Wonderful city, 2 massive clubs, and a big kind of commercial area. But really, the Football Museum should be in Sheffield. And the council should have done more to get that to Sheffield. When you walk out of Sheffield train station, you should be walking into the middle of Sheffield knowing full well that you're in the home of football.
Reasons for that vary, but it isn't helped by its 2 professional football clubs failing to secure top-flight English football on a regular basis.
To have the two Sheffield clubs in the Premier League as regulars, if you like, even not even being as grand as a Liverpool and as an Everton in terms of sort of success would be huge. So yeah, everybody around the world would know more, and it would give the city the resources to shout about it.
Football is a sport that very rarely ceases to give the world some quite astonishing moments. The beautiful game by name and by nature. A game where dreams come true. A universal community that connects people no matter their identity. The game we love today would not have been made possible without the action and decisions of Victorian Sheffielders. The world's first association football club, the rules of our game, the tactical structure and how we play it, the birth of cup competitions, and the world's oldest professional football stadium are all traced back to one place, demonstrating that this city really is, as the locals would say, Toma football.